Hi, I'm Simon K. Jones, and you're listening to the audio version of Tales from the Triverse. Today we have The Professor, Part 2, and in the last chapter we discovered that Professor Simova is on the run, as seems to be happening to a lot of people. Lola and the rebels that she's fallen in with are trying to intercept him before he gets picked up by the authorities. 3203, Late Frostfall, the outskirts of Tapu. A rickety wooden bridge was the only easy way in or out of Tapu on foot. It was a village built on the expectation that its inhabitants and visitors would be arriving primarily by boat along the Kotobel River, or else flying in from elsewhere. It was a Koth settlement after all, and they had little reason to trudge along the path through the swamps. "The indignity of it all," said Lycasra, tutting as they surveyed the bridge. "If I wasn't looking after you kids, I'd been here hours ago." "If I wasn't looking after you kids, I'd have been here hours ago." Flexing their wings, they elected to skip the bridge altogether, silhouetted momentarily against the moonlit sky, before landing on the far side, where the sodden ground wound its way up and between the oddly angular buildings. "There's usually a toll to pay," Pilpo said. "A really annoying human with a big nose. Wears offensively green trousers." She looked hesitantly across the bridge, then under it, as if expecting him to be lurking below. "Wonder where he is." "Let's not question it too much," Darrella said, leading the way. The wooden beams creaked beneath their feet, an offshoot of the river rushing by below. Stretching out over the wide river, the village was perched partly on a small island, and had been extended in all directions by the addition of buildings on stilts and the incorporation of what had once been ships. It was a puzzle of a place, built from a seemingly random combination of materials and ideas. There were no roads to speak of, only planks set into the mud, and wooden steps and walkways, some twisting up to reach structures built on top of each other. It was dark, mysterious, evidently steeped in its own history, and absolutely perfect for a covert rendezvous. The air was thick and warm, insects buzzing around their heads. Needless to say, Lola was very excited. It was a little closer to working a case, too, meeting an informant, following a lead. It might even turn out that Professor Simova had information that could be useful against Chancellor Baltine and whatever was happening back home. A long shot for sure, but if there was a chance of gathering evidence that could be used to help Clark and the others, she had to take it. Everything was wet, from the ground to the walls of the buildings. The wooden walkways and planks were an attempt to lift people out of the mud, but with only middling success. Tapu was a village that appeared to be slipping into the river, and it was something of a miracle that it hadn't already been swept away. The three of them caught up with Lycasra and headed into the village proper. "Remember," they said, "low profile is the name of the game here. We meet our contact, get the professor, and get out, hopefully without anyone blinking an eye." How did the professor get all the way here on his own? Lola had many questions, as the others may have noted on occasion. "Wasn't on his own," Darrella said. "He'd have been picked up by a group closer to Brulia. They'll have escorted him this far. Now it's our turn." Lola still found it hard to remember that Darrella had been involved with the rebels for months, at least in a light capacity. They'd connected with her some time after the encounter in the market, back when Lola and Clark had been escorting a prisoner back to Mid-Earth. The whole time Lola had been living in Brulia, trying to build a case against Baltine and find evidence against the conspiracy back on Earth, she'd kept her motivations hidden from Darrella. She was Baltine's daughter, after all. How much easier would it have been if they'd worked together? At least all of that was out in the open now. "To the tavern, then!" Pilpo was as excitable as ever. Perhaps that was how her SDC colleagues had seen Lola, back when she'd first shown up at the office on Stamford and Coyne. "Low profile," Lycasra said, their voice low and guttural. "Remember?" "Fine, but we're in the middle of nowhere, and besides, this is Koth territory." "Doesn't mean you can trust everyone you meet," Lycasra said, rolling their eyes. The tavern was built into the repurposed hull of an old sailing ship, now lifted up and settled on the bank of the river. An entrance had been cut into the side of the hull, leaving a gaping maw of wooden teeth. Lanterns hung from the beams, their glass mottled and greened. The beat of live music thumped dimly from inside. Everywhere Lola looked, Tupu was being dragged back into the ground, into the river, nature doing its utmost to subsume the village. A porch of sorts had been formed from the hull, shielded from the worst of the elements, leading through to the doorway that led within. The walls of the sheltered area were plastered with papers, advertisements for services, announcements from locals, warnings from religious leaders. Much of it was in languages Lola didn't recognise, but one of the posters practically waved for her attention. A poster with drawings of two stern and dangerous individuals. Standing back to back, she recognised them immediately, even from the ink sketches. Halbad and Celine Gabrith, brother and sister leaders of the famed monster-hunting crew, the Six Blades. "Oh my God," she said, pointing. "Look, it's the Six Blades. Halbad and Celine." Pilpo frowned. "Who?" Leaning closer to the poster, Lycasra harumphed. "Don't know them." "They came to London when we had a Kengto incident?" "I remember it," Darrella said. "That was when I started to notice strange things happening in Brulia. The Kengto's appearance in London was not an accident." "They are so amazing," Lola said, tapping her finger on the poster. "What does it say?" Darrella leaned in closer. "They're in the region, looking for work. We should totally contact them." "Wonderful idea," Lycasra said, clacking their beak. "They're mercenaries. They work for the highest bidder. You've no idea what their politics are. Not to mention, we don't have any monsters need killing." "Come on," Darrella said, pulling a hood up to cover her head and lifting a mask over the lower part of her face. Of all of them, she was the most recognisable, even far from Brulia. Fortunately, hiding one's face was not unusual in Palinor, and especially in a region beset with all manner of unpleasant flying insects. She pushed open the door to the tavern and indicated for the rest of them to follow as the music flooded out and into the evening. The interior dropped down several steps, spread across the curve of the hull's interior. Stairs wound up to a balcony area, which looked like it might lead through to the above-deck cabins. Everything was tilted 45 degrees, the old ship having been grounded on its side. It was enough to make Lola feel drunk without having had a single drink. A small band played on a raised platform at one end, a jazzy, improvised sound. The place was busy, packed with a mix of Koth, Ainfa, humans, and even some species that Lola didn't immediately recognise. There was always so much more to learn about Palinor, even for someone who had lapped up everything she had been able to read since she was a child. Compared to Brulia, it was noticeably more varied, with humans in the minority. A long bar stretched the length of the room, with patrons sat at stools, studiously ignoring each other. More busy were the tables filling the main floor. "Pilpo," said Lycasra, "find us a table, ideally with a good view of the entrance." As Pilpo scampered away, Lola took in the customers. A one-winged Koth with an eye patch, a tall Ainfa with two gnarly-looking creatures on leashes sniffing around her ankles, a green, humanoid being, entirely naked, though covered by spiny fronds and appearing to have gills, the largest Koth she'd ever seen, bat-like wings folded behind their back, and curving Diabolos horns, sat on an enormous throne at the far end of the tavern, fawned over by a coterie of Ainfa and humans. There were stories everywhere she looked. At the bar was another medley of fascinating characters, but as Lola stared, she became suddenly, abruptly aware that she recognised one of them. Gina, her friend on the Brulian city guard, sat innocuously on a stool, drinking from a thick glass. Lola hadn't recognised her immediately, as she was out of uniform and her hair was loose, but her face, even seen from the side, was unmistakable. "Shit," Lola said. "I know someone here." Darrella shot her a confused look. "What? How is that possible?" "Don't look now, but I'm pretty sure that's Gina." It only took Darrella a second to recall the name. "The city guard who warned you to leave the city?" "Yes, she's at the bar." Lola had turned away from the bar in case Gina glanced in their direction. The Brulian Guard have to be tracking Professor Simova, Darrella said, putting a hand on Lycazra's arm. We have to abort now. They've likely already got him. Calm down, dear, Lycazra said, smiling. Christian's been here for several days already. If Brulian authorities are in town, we'll handle them. He'll already have marked them all. If they see Lola, or me for that matter, they'll try to arrest us. Lycazra bowed their head a little. They are very welcome to try. But they are here for Simova, not for you or Lola. We just need to get him first. If anyone gets in our way, we'll deal with them. The city guard is well outside of their jurisdiction, and won't be calling on any backup this far south. Having had quite enough of all the bluster, Lola held up a hand. Can we try something else first? Can I try talking to her? Thanks for listening. You can leave a comment and find lots more about Triverse over on the newsletter at simonkjones.substack.com.